that we're all here together. I'm HP Lozito. I'm the Executive Director of Out in the Open. Thank you. We connect rural LGBTQ people to build community, visibility, knowledge, and power. Hi. I'm so happy that you all are here. This is really a treat. All week I've been like, how many people are going to come? Diana and I have been like, we don't know, we have no idea. So you all did a perfect job. Just giving lots of affirmations. A few thank yous. Thank you to Tori Peters and Imogen Finney for being here with us this evening. Okay, I'm going to be bossy for a second, which is not usually my norm. I'm going to do a bunch of thank yous so you can clap at the end of all the thank yous, okay? Thank you to Diana Whitney from our staff who's worked so hard on this event since the winter. Thank you to the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center for hosting us this evening. Thank you to the Brooks Memorial Library and their fabulous staff for collaborating. We really love our library here in Brattleboro. Thank you to Red and Everyone's Books for this idea at all and this collaboration. Thank you to Orchard Hill Redworks for the delicious desserts. Some of you maybe had already or will have after. And thank you to the Brattleboro Town Arts Fund for supporting this evening as well. That's all the thank yous. You may not clap. I'm going to talk for just a couple more minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Red. Earlier this week, I was talking with my partner Mel about what I was going to say, and she was like, "Are you going to cry?" Which I don't think so. Time will tell, but it seems pretty unlikely at this point. Folks who know me or who have been to an Out in the Open event know that I frequently do cry at the beginning of our events because they really mean a lot to me. And I especially cry if I'm like, oh no, is it going to happen? It might. And this event really means a lot to me. Yeah, I've had the very distinct pleasure of being family with Red and Imogen for about 20 years. From meeting them in the woods at Camp Trans as punk organizers in our 20s, to raising our queer families, kids, and dogs alongside each other here in rural Vermont as punk organizers in our 40s. I feel so lucky to get to hold up your work as part of mine, and to know and be known by each of you. Two of the funniest and most brilliant people I have ever met. I love you both very much. Love you too, HP. Yay! Red, I'm going to reveal a secret, and over there was like, I feel like it's our not-so-secret goal to make Brattleboro in southern Vermont the undisputed transliterary capital of the world.
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah, so I think we sort of already have that in the bag. We have been a home for transliterary work for many years, and yeah, we're planning for it to stay that way for a long time. Back in 2012, we hosted a reading of Topside Press's The Collection, short fiction from the transgender vanguard, that both Red and Imogen, along with many others like Casey Plett, have pieces in. It was at the Age Project of Southern Vermont here in Brattleboro on Grove Street, just over here. In 2013, we hosted a stop of the original Nevada book tour at Wendy Levy's Cheese Shop. That was just over here on the corner on Main Street. I know, they have the best breakfast. Last year, we co-hosted with the library author Jean Thornton on tour for her book, ASL. Yes, yes. Coming up later this summer, we're hosting Eli Clare for a reading at Our Land in West Brattleboro, August 22nd, if you want to put that on your calendar. And in another 15 years, I'm certain we'll be talking about this event as well, historic evening. Social movement history is really a big part of our work at Out in the Open, so it felt worth it to give that context for this evening. And now I'm going to turn it over to Red, and she's going to say some more things. Here you go. I'm going to go.
Hello.
Yeah.
How is everyone? That's horrible. You're doing very badly. I feel very sorry for you. Can we try that again? How is everyone? That's much better. That's a thing that I historically was a stand-up comedian, and that was you always have to do that. I don't know why. But I'm very happy to see you here. Happy Pride, everyone. This is my 24th Pride as an out trans person, which feels wild. It's a very long time. And speaking of very long times, people who aren't the people you came to see speak have been talking for those very long times already. So the way this evening's going to work is Imogen and Tori here are each going to take turns doing a little bit of reading from their works, possibly not the works you're familiar with, but possibly. And then we're going to, the three of us, kind of dive into a totally well-planned and thought-out discussion of various ideas and issues of relating to trans literature. And then we're going to open it up for a little bit of audience Q&A. So get those questions ready. You're going to do a whole lot of legwork here. So anyway, I'm going to pick Imogen first, because her book is the one sitting up top. Yeah, Imogen and I met a very long time ago at Camp Trans, and I thought I was cooler than Imogen for a very brief period before I actually met her in person, and have been trailing behind ever since. That's the personal spin on the bio. The actual the thing that's on the back of the book to make sure that we got all the correct bona fides listed out. Imogen Binney is the author of the novel Nevada, which is a good thing to put on the novel Nevada, I say, which was a finalist for the 2014 Lambda Literary Award for transgender fiction. I think that was the one where we went to the award and I met the cowboy from the Village People, which is still one of the great highlights of my life.
Yeah, I also met him.
Yeah. No, yeah, we met him together. It was a wonderful time. Let's see. And she has won the Betty Berzon Emerging Writers Award, a writer for several television shows and a former columnist for Maximum Rock and Roll. She lives in Vermont with her family. And she'll be reading whatever the hell she wants.
I will, thank you, we're on. Yeah, am I too loud? Is that, okay, can we turn me down? It's cool to talk. Did you say you can hear me or you can't hear me? Okay, I'm gonna stop fucking around. This is an anthology that came out in England that didn't come out here that I wrote an essay for. And I'm gonna read that essay. It's about bikes. There's bikes in Nevada. I have 2 copies of this, and they're both gonna be for sale after this, and they're gonna cost $1,000 each. This is called Break the Ice, Love Theme from Rad. It took me a couple decades to figure it out, but I was already trans in 1986. I just didn't know back then that being trans was a thing. It feels weird to be reading and sitting, but I feel like it feels weird to have like a headset. This part is, it's so odd, but I feel weirder pacing.
It's proper for like a gamer headset.
I know, right? I feel like I should play.
I'm ready to go.
What do people play? Fortnite? I feel like I say I'm gonna ask later who you guys think I should main in Fortnite, so please have an answer ready because I've never played it. It took me a couple decades to figure it out, but I was already trans in 1986. I just didn't know back then that being trans was a thing. All I really knew was shame and maybe guilt. This isn't about being trans. I transitioned a long time ago, and the last thing I want to talk about is gender. Spoiler for later when I don't want to talk about gender. I'm kidding. We can talk about gender.
We have to.
Yes. This is about bikes, although I guess it's about bodies too. Almost 40 years later, I'm a therapist. I think about bodies a lot. The film Rad came out in 1986. It tells the story, you know Rad. It tells the story of small-town paperboy Crew Jones, a BMX enthusiast whose dream is to race on the epic Hell Track, a prestigious, groundbreaking new kind of race, quote, that combines the different styles and skills of BMX racers and freestylers. There's 10 pages of this. In order to do so, however, he has to surpass the underhanded trickery of sleazy businessman Duke Best and his minions, win over his mother, who believes strongly that choosing Hell Track over his college entrance exams is a self-destructive choice, and beat the effortless talent and skill of professional BMX rider Bart Taylor, played by 1984 Olympic gymnastics champion Bart Connor. When Rad is remembered by film critics, it is not remembered fondly. It has a green splat from critics on Rotten Tomatoes. But I was 7. This was the VHS era and the peak of BMX as a fad. We rented Rad over and over. We looked up to Crew, and also to Christian, the female BMX rider who teaches Crew to love and to do flips. The kids on my block in the woods of New Jersey all rode BMX bikes. We grew up on quiet streets with woods to explore, a terrifying stretch of active train tracks, and a big pile of old-fashioned wooden shutters with faded yellow lead paint flaking off them that a neighbor said we could have. We used those shutters to recreate Hell Track as best we could. We built ramps. You'd put a piece of firewood down at one end, lay the shutter on top of it at an angle, and launch yourself into the air. I was 4 feet tall, probably weighed 50 pounds, and jumping 6 inches in the air from a broken shutter and a hunk of firewood felt like flight, like freedom, like power. Like a body was the best thing in the world you could have. I'm sure you know about the fight or flight response, the state of alert that our nervous systems go into when threatened. You may or may not be aware that as time has gone on, 2 more F's have been added. Now it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is about flattering and caretaking the people around you to keep yourself safe. I landed on freeze. I got stuck there. I wasn't abused or anything, but our bodies don't differentiate between big trauma and little trauma. They just fight, or fly, or freeze. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but I do remember trying to watch a children's cartoon called Jem and the Holograms in secret. If you're not familiar with it, it's about an all-woman new wave band fronted by a pink-haired singer and the very slightly edgier, also all-women new wave band who try to kill them. I didn't have a lot of time to myself at age 6. It was difficult to watch cartoons without being noticed, but I did everything I could to absorb whatever brief seconds of that half-hour-long, neon-colored pop music toy commercial that I could. I knew that I wanted to, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to want to. As a kid, I felt this way about pretty much everything. If I wanted something, it was probably not okay to want it, so it wasn't worth acknowledging to myself or anyone else. So I froze. Except when I was jumping off shutters on an imaginary hell track. Blumhouse made a film adaptation of Jem and the Holograms in 2015. Don't believe the green splats on Rotten Tomatoes. It was great. There was puberty. There was teenage drug abuse, there were romantic relationships I didn't know how to be in because I didn't know how to want anything without freezing up in shame. I kept a lid on it. Physically, if not emotionally, I attended college. Then I moved to New York City. There were more relationships I didn't know how to be in. Drug abuse evolved into alcohol abuse just because it was easier. I played in bands because I liked bands. I worked in bookstores because I liked books, but actual, vulnerable desire remained impossible. My memory of my years in New York is pretty sporadic, but I sort of remember that there was another puberty. Transition is often framed as the thing you do that solves all your problems. Then I was finally a woman and I lived happily ever after, but that framework ignores everything we actually know about trauma, nervous systems, bodies, and minds. I had been white-knuckling my whole life, dissociated from the shame I had not yet figured out how to engage with. Transitioning didn't change any of that. Anxiety is in large part a habit, a cycle of thought and action and then thought again. Depression is the same, so is shame. The things we do to make those afflictions bearable, they become habits too. And habits don't just disappear because we want them to. I don't remember specifics, but at some point I went home to my mom's house for a couple days, and when I came back to New York, I brought my old BMX bike with me. As a therapist, I believe strongly that we all have an innate drive to feel better, to heal. Our trauma histories and habits can co-opt that drive, though, generally into short-term distress relief. I don't know why I decided to bring that bike back with me. Probably something to do with the memory of feeling cool on it, combined with the fact that bike commuting could take money from my scant subway fare budget and put it into my 40-ounce beer bottle budget. But looking back, I think it was that innate drive to heal, to grow, like the weed that somehow pops through the cement of the sidewalk doing its thing. I don't remember what happened to that bike, which I wish I must have gotten as a teen. Maybe it was stolen. The important thing is that soon some friends found me an ancient, heavy blue 12-speed. I have a very clear memory of the first time I rode that bike from Brooklyn to work in Manhattan. I remember carrying it awkwardly down 3 flights of stairs from my apartment, getting on it and starting slowly, tentative and wobbly, down quiet residential Hart Street. I remember the cold air on my face, the opposite of the muggy heat on the train. I remember feeling like, can I just do this? Can I just be out here in the world, in the air? Can I take up space this way? Can I trust cars not to kill me? I remember turning, terrified, onto Broadway, one of the big arterial streets. In that part of Brooklyn, there are bodegas and squat apartment buildings on either side of the street, just like anywhere else, but the subway runs along Broadway above you. Between that bridge and the buildings, there are only a few minutes of the day when the sun makes it to the street. It's kind of depressing. It feels like being inside all day. And I guess I wasn't often there at that point in the morning, because I remember very clearly that the sun was shining down on me through that bright sliver of sky as I waited for the light to change. I didn't have gloves on. I must have just kept my hands in my pockets when I walked out to the train, but outside in the air, I remember that my hands were cold and dry. I remember thinking that I would have to get gloves. I doubt there were cobblestones, but it felt like there were. The street was awful. I remember how deep the potholes were, far deeper than the potholes anywhere else I had lived. I remember realizing that they would actually matter now, could affect me. I couldn't just ride over or through them. I'd fall, or blow a tire, or bend a wheel. I had a deeply unfamiliar sense of vulnerability. I'd spent most of my life safe in an elaborate system of defenses against shame, fear, and grief. But in this moment, a pothole could kill me, or a bus. Even an unpredictable pedestrian, or anyone so maniacal that they would drive a car in New York City. The kind of safety I was used to was about not having a body, disappearing. But here, I couldn't help but take up space. I existed. I remember that first light changing. I remember being worried about the cars I was riding near and then being surprised by a corresponding feeling. No, I do get to take up space, and an unexpected sense of power. I don't know if I'd felt power like that before. I had a body, I was present in it, it could do things. These cars could watch the fuck out for me. Riding a bike in New York takes all of your attention. You're using your legs, your arms, your shoulders, your core. You're listening and you're watching. You can smell the garbage. I remember riding up to the Williamsburg Bridge. It looked impossible. I remember not knowing if my legs would be able to get me to the top. I remember a new oppositional part of me taking over. I would will myself up there. It was not about my muscles. It wasn't a question. I would do this. I did. My legs hurt, but I got up to the peak of the bridge. I remember how much wider the East River looked from above. I remember the way the angle of the sun made the waves sparkle. I don't think I'd ever thought about there even being waves in the East River. I remember being hot inside my wool pea coat, sweaty on the inside and cold on the outside. It's windier up there than it is down on the street. I remember coasting down the far side of the bridge, proud that I had done it, then waiting for the light at the bottom, in Manhattan, panting. I remember some insane-seeming person not waiting for the light, just swerving full speed into traffic. I don't remember how many days it would be until I was doing that too. Maybe one. I remember the long avenues and bike lanes of the Lower East Side looking bland in comparison to the bumpy streets of Brooklyn. I remember feeling like I had accomplished something as I took the giant chain from my waist, similar to the one Joseph Gordon-Levitt wears in the classic and splatless film, Premium Rush, and locked my bike to a parking meter outside of the bookstore. Y'all have seen Premium Rush, right? I felt good. That was new. I remember wondering if I would just get to work sweaty from now on. I would. Riding a bike got me into my body. I would commute by bike around New York for a couple years, then move to Oakland, California, where I would bike up and down the East Bay for a couple years more. They put in a new bridge between Oakland and San Francisco a few years ago, something like 7 miles long, and I heard it has a bike lane. If it had existed when I lived there, I would have commuted into band practice on my bike twice a week. We had an indie punk band. It was all women. I had pink hair. I learned to trust and love at least one person. We got married. They're here. I gave up drinking and drugs not out of personal growth, but because the hangovers kept getting worse until they weren't worth it. Turns out I fried my thyroid. Whoops. We moved to the woods of Vermont. We had kids. I turned 40. Somehow, after that, birthdays continued to happen to me. I don't remember what happened to that blue 12-speed. I sort of remember that at some point it was fixed up and donated. I got a secondhand 10-speed from a guy with a barn full of bikes who called himself the Bike Resurrector. I think he's still on Craigslist. I think you can go find him. It's gray. It doesn't feel as good to ride as that blue behemoth, although if I'm being honest, I don't know if anything could. I don't remember what made me decide to show my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old the movie Rad, but 7-year-old appreciated it, but my 4-year-old got really into it. Immediately after our first screening, she ran to the front door, got on her tiny bike, and rode directly off the edge of the porch onto her face. This is true. I couldn't have been prouder. She started wearing all red every chance she got, just like Drew does when, stop here and watch Rad first if you don't want spoilers. He does manage to race at Hell Track. We have spent a lot of time listening to the Power Rock soundtrack. When we're able to, we drive 40 minutes to the closest thing to Hell Track we have, a dirt pump track with ramps where we could learn to do flips if we had someone to teach us, and if our knees didn't hurt. That is, of course, in Keene. It's fucking rad. Turns out, they still make BMX bikes. Last summer, I bought a red Sunday EX. I am tall and old, and I'm sure I look silly riding up and down the street, pedaling with my legs all bent, but I don't care. I am a mom. Nothing I do is going to make me look cool, and nothing gets me out of my head and into my body, into the present, as quickly as getting on a bike in the wind and the sun. I want to say something wise and profound here about childhood and trauma and embodiment and healing, and how if we are doing it right, we can help our kids be less messed up than we were, but I can't quite find the words. But I think that's okay. But I think it's okay that I can't find the words that I want here. It's always been safer in my head, where the words are, than it's been in my body, where the feelings are. I'm not even going to make a self-conscious joke about movies and splats or the differences between myself and Drew's mom. All I want to do right now is ride bikes with my kids. My kids are stoked to ride bikes with me. That's a pretty good place to be. I just wish we had some shutters. Thank you.
That was pretty good.
I was just challenged to follow that. That was my
Yeah. Good luck, Prashad. Alright, so our next reader,
Why are people laughing?
our next reader is better than me at everything we've ever competed at, which isn't that many things, but she beat me in StarCraft, she beat me in pool, two things that I thought I was pretty good at, but neither one of us won a Pulitzer Prize, so.
A couple of Lambda literary losers up here.
Oh God, where's the fucking bio?
Do you want me to do my own bio?
I just want to read from your book, so I've made sure that I got everything right.
I want you to do your own bio.
Sometimes we don't always get what we want. I mean, you can do your own bio. As soon as I turn it over to you, you can do whatever.
I just
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Red, I want you to do it too.
What's
I
that?
want you to do it too. I want 2 bios.
2 bios. Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, wait, we'll see. No. Tori Peters is the best-selling author of the novel The Transition Baby, which won the PEN/Hemingway Award for debut novel and was named one of the 100 best books of the 21st century by the New York Times. So that's cool. Peters rides a pink motorcycle and splits her time between Brooklyn and an off-grid cabin in Vermont.
Oh, that's a work in Vermont. People could call me out on that one.
Yeah. As far as you know.
Yeah. I think that was a good enough bio.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Do I just begin?
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
I'm going to read from a story called The Chaser. When I read this regularly, I did it in like a 90s bro voice. I'm going to attempt that voice, which is, the problem is if I don't do it right, people will be like, Tori, that just sounds like you. Anyway, let's see if you can differentiate the voices. Okay. Oh, no, it's too much. The The reason that Robbie had a slight odor, like leaves decaying in the fall, is that he didn't shower. He didn't shower because the boys' dorm had only a gang shower, a beige-tiled room with 4 shower heads poking out from the wall. Robbie hated getting naked in front of the other boys, for anyone to see his chubby, feminine body and his tiny cock. I didn't like the gang shower when I first got there. It seemed like some weird holdover from the 1950s, something that should have been modernized after the sex panics that society had gone through when it realized that boys could be molested too. But nope, the Quakers never got the memo, probably thought it built character. Back in the suburbs, my friends would have called our shower rooms super gay, all of us soaping up in front of one another. But that's not how things were at boarding school. The homo thing was to be afraid of looking at one another's bodies. The hetero thing was to just dangle your dick out while talking to one another, acting like you couldn't care less about the other dicks pointing back at you. And then, even to outman each other, we would just be naked all the time. This one kid, Kyle, he took the shower head off the pipe so the water came out in a hard stream like from a fire hose, and he'd wash his asshole in front of us with the same chill that he brushed his teeth. We all started doing it. We called it the power shower. If you wanted to show you weren't homo, just get that power shower up your ass in front of the other dudes. It was this weird posture, and it was effective. I respected Kyle. He worked out, he listened to hip hop, and he washed his ass with the equivalent of a power washer like it was no big deal. Weird flex, but still, impressive flex. Anyway, I got placed with Robbie as my roommate the fall semester of my junior year. He had to ditch class so he could shower when no one else was around. He'd get detention, but the trade-off was worth it to him for the occasional shower in peace. Early on, I tried to explain to him that if he didn't want anyone to think he was a fag, he just had to not care what we thought about his body. But of course, he didn't necessarily want us to think he wasn't a fag. Not only did he care what boys thought about his body, some part of him wanted boys to notice his body, even if he couldn't quite bring himself to say that. That's how it is for girls too, I think. They want us to notice their bodies, to obsess about their bodies, and that's why they can't show them to us. A power washer up the ass might ruin the allure. Robbie and I started hooking up our last month together as roommates. There'd been a strange tension between us for a month before that. I pretty much ignored him at first. He had 2 modes, shy and nervous or embarrassingly exuberant. The latter I observed during the day from the distance when he'd sit with the girls and they'd get going. I'd look over and there he'd be, the kid who barely raised his voice above a whisper in the dorm, shrieking, "Oh my God, she did not," and gesticulating wildly. Censored. Girls.
It is okay to wait.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, girls, especially this one clique of senior girls, really liked Robbie. That was one reason why no one ever outright bullied him. You didn't want those girls to think you were an asshole. But it wasn't like you'd score with girls by being nice to Robbie either. About 2 months into the semester, he and I got into a habit of quietly talking after lights out. Him on the upper bunk and me below, telling each other about our families, or else he'd share gossip from the girls' dorm. He had a pretty good window on the girls, one for sure that I didn't have. I found out that he secretly smoked. He had a half carton of cigarettes hidden in a coffee can out in the weeds near the soccer field, which seemed rebellious for him. One night we opened the dorm window, helped each other out, and shared some smokes out in the field. "How come I spend like every night within a couple feet of you?" I asked him when we were sitting out in the grass under a bright moon, and I never smelled cigarettes. He smiled in his shy way with his dimples and soft cheeks. "I have perfect grooming," he said. I couldn't tell in what way he meant it, if he was joking or not, given his thing about the shower, or what to make of the slight edge of flirtation, the way he invited me to notice the care he took with his body. Actually, he did have a lot of hair care products and stuff for his skin, and once or twice I think he wore eyeliner. I didn't have any products. Boys in the dorm let each other know that products were a sign of weakness. Every boy on the soccer team, including me, washed his hair with bar soap. Obviously, bar soap fucked my hair right up. I was self-conscious about how frizzy it was. The strong thing would have been to just use conditioner and not care what that meant about me, but that wasn't something I could let myself do. The problem, wow, they really don't want me to read this. The problem wasn't that my hair was bad. It's like stopping right in front. The problem, okay. The problem wasn't that my hair was bad, which pointed to, The problem wasn't that my hair was bad. The problem was that I was vain enough to care that it was bad, which pointed to a failure inside of me. Using conditioner would have fed a suspect vanity. Give it a little, and pretty soon I'm primping every time I walk out a door. As a compromise, I wore a hat a lot, the brim over my eyes to sort of flatten out my hair and ease the frizz. Before lights out one night, I was looking in the mirror, trying to ruffle my hair after a day of hat heads so tight the roots of my hair hurt whenever anything stirred them. I didn't realize Robbie was watching me, but then he said softly, "You'd have such nice hair if you just took care of it. You're lucky to have hair like that." I turned to say something biting, but I caught myself. He sat in the bed in a pair of loose cotton pants and a t-shirt, and in the yellow light of his bed lamp, I noticed, not for the first time, that he was sort of pretty, in the way that fat girls are pretty, all chubby cheeks and doe eyes and soft skin like women in old paintings. The urge to snap at him fell away. He got up, opened a box on the shelf, and pulled out a small plastic tub. "A hair mask," he said and handed it to me. Then he started talking to me in that exuberant way I'd only seen him talk with girls. He told me, his hands fluttering, that if I really wanted to heal my hair, and if I didn't want to buy products, the best thing to do would be make my own hair mask with avocado, honey, olive oil, and eggs, to put it in my hair for an hour, then wash it out, because my hair needed to be able to hold moisture again. "You need as many humectants as you can get." I stared at him. Humectants? But rather than wilt under my look, he reached out, held my wrist with his fingers, and said, "Oh, come on, I'll do it for you." He led me to his bed, and I was suddenly very turned on. I let him direct me to sit cross-legged on the floor, between his legs, facing away from him, while he massaged the hair mask onto my scalp with lubricated and thorough fingers that slicked through my hair. It was like they woke up all the nerves in my head just to soothe them. From between his soft thighs, I wondered what to do about my hard cock. 3 nights later, I stopped trying to be discreet when I jerked off at night. Thank you. I forgot that that's going to be broadcast on television. Sorry about that.
Well, the helicopter that I had scheduled
Yeah.
is late, so. Well, I don't know. One more round of applause for both of our. It's great because now the part that I'm responsible for can suck, and who cares? We won't remember that. So kind of the next portion of the evening is meant to be kind of very loosey-goosey. I have a couple of very vague kind of conversational prompts, but we don't have to stick to that at all. We can talk about whatever the hell we want, and ideally the two of you will talk more than I do, but good luck with that.
I have a question for you, Ren.
Yes.
Have you seen Grave with the Fireflies?
No, I have not. No. So Imogen and I watched Grave with the Fireflies last night. Has anyone here seen Grave with the Fireflies? Right? Show your hands. What a wonderful and beautiful movie that I never, ever, 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 ever want to watch again in my entire life.
We both cried a lot. And then
Yeah, I did a
like
lot of crying. It's extremely sad. And yeah, I don't have the defenses for something like that.
Not even once.
Not even once. The kind of very vague theme that I have been thinking about in doing this event, talking about how it's Pride, how it's one in a long string of prides that I've been involved in. I originally came out in 2002 which like is wild that there's now people who like, that's like right when they were born, and they're like grown-up adult people. That's very odd to me. But so I was thinking about that, kind of like what things were like back then. Very difficult, turns out. If you weren't around at the time, it sucked. But also things in their way kind of suck now. Turns out, time is not, you know, a linear trajectory into good things happening. So, so I've thought about the kind of past, the present, and the future, because spoiler alert for this event, this is meant to be the first of many. I'm not sure what we're ultimately going to do. We basically are obligated to do one more event in the fall, and then 1,000 more forever for the rest of our lives. Which hopefully will be pretty good, and hopefully they'll be good events. So kind of with a theme of the past, the present, and the future, I think the first like conversational prompt for the two of you to answer in however you choose is, who the hell are you? Where the hell did you come from?
What was the second part?
Where the hell did you come from?
Where did we come from? Where did we come from?
I feel like you should take that first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks. Grew up in New Jersey. Yeah, both are correct. Yeah, I don't know, being trans was weird as a kid when you didn't hear about being trans except in very limited ways. I remember, I wrote a little bit about this in the afterword to Nevada when it came out again. Kind of being like, I can't wait to get on the internet, this like internet thing that I've heard about, and it's gonna be so rad, and it's gonna like help me figure out what my deal is, because I don't know what my deal is. And then getting on the internet and finding like a lot of like cross-dressers' personal websites on GeoCities, which like, I'm not gonna talk shit about anybody's personal website. I mean, probably some of them are awful, but like probably it's, you know, everybody doing their best. And kind of being like, I don't feel connected to this. And then finding like the archive of transgender fiction, which is like thinly veiled, or not veiled at all, erotica. Fiction mania was like a big important thing, kind of being like, oh, I guess this is like the kind of thing that like you just are trans in private unless you live in like Los Angeles or wherever people lived when they did. Like it was consistently just like, yeah, we don't do that here. Like maybe there's somewhere where people do that, but we don't do that here. Which like I think is still a pretty common perspective that people have when they're coming to a trans identity. Is like, yeah, there are trans people out there. I know about that now, but like not at my high school or whatever. Although I guess there's lots of trans people in high schools now. But yeah, it was hard to find a way to, I was writing about having a body in that piece. It was hard to be like, what would my embodied experience of being trans even be? Like, how do you go from like, I must not let anyone know about whatever it is that I must not even let myself know about, to like, I am doing something about it in like the real world, in meat space. Like, how would I even do that? What would I even do? Like, it was just like, kind of bewildering. And I always feel like I should have something intelligent to say about like what it's like now versus what it's like then, but the reality is I was like figuring this stuff out at the time that I was figuring this stuff out, and I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna speak to somebody else's experience from now, you know what I mean, and tell them what their experience is like, but it seems like there's more information available, there's more, I don't know, it seems like it's different. Maybe somebody here is a lot younger than me to tell me.
I think it's different. It's different and complicated. I think particularly if you want to talk about like the trans identity in general, like the experience of that is the like 20, 24, 25, however many years ago. That was, I very similarly had that experience. I grew up in North Carolina and like knew essentially that I was trans for a long time, but that was like a punchline in Jim Carrey movies and like Jerry Springer, and I was like, well, I don't want to be those people. I literally came out to my friends because I heard they told me about meeting a trans woman in Durham. Like, I was like, whoa, one in real life, huh? And you're kind of okay with that? Well, get ready. Like, my experience. And very similarly, like, searching for a community at that time was very different. which was like performing arts tour thing that I got involved in. I learned that trans men existed when a group of them showed up at my house to take me on tour. And otherwise I had seen pictures, but it was just like, I don't think they're trying that hard to pursue. I just didn't know that was a thing. That was like my experience. So that like level, I feel like that's a hard level of like broad ignorance if you're like interested in like what trans people are doing. I think that's a hard thing to meet today. But what is like very focused today is the like pushback against being trans. But like which is very different, and I can't like necessarily speak to exactly what that's like experiencing as a young person. It was very ambiently, everybody kind of hates trans people was the thing when I was younger, and now it's like some people very much hate trans people and other people don't, right? And that's like a complexity. So
I wanted you to go first because I feel like if I talk about my experience of being trans, you were actually part of it. Like, not that you wanted to be, but
No, I did, and I do.
but like, I had we're close to the same age, and I had a similar thing where like I found a bunch of like cross-dresser websites, and I was like, oh, I guess that's what I am. And I was like, I'm just gonna go for it, you know. And I went to like cross-dresser conventions, and there's a story in this about a cross-dresser convention, and you know, the thing was like, you just dress up on Saturdays, and that's great, and then you can have like a wife and kids the rest of the time. And I would go to these things, and I was like 22, and everyone else there was like in their, well, my age now, you know, and older. But then I was like, basically like, I don't know, I was a few years when Nevada came out, I was on hormones, but very, very early, and I was kind of like, I'm still just going to be like, this is just going to help my cross-dressing or something. And then I read Nevada, and I was like furious. And I feel like you got that a lot, actually. That people were like, you know, it was just such such an emotional reaction to see, oh, there's another way, and somebody else has figured it out, and somebody else is doing it. And I remember there's a line that is James' age, so I can take it with a grain of salt now, but there's a line about like cross-dressers with neutral heels in their closet. Or like, open my closet, there's like a pair of neutral heels. And I was furious, I was like, fuck this Imogen Binnie. How did she get into my closet? And you know, it was like, so that there's a way in which like, you know, UT Rad, like, the way that I became trans was just slightly after, and I looked up to both of you as sort of like inventing a path that I then followed, even though, you know, we're of the same era, the same way, but I was not as innovative in terms of deviating from the very basic things on the internet for a long time. And then, yeah, by the time I came around to that era in which you had published, I kind of inaugurated, I think, whole new possibilities for ways of being trans.
Can I say two things to that?
yeah.
The first is that, yeah, I appreciate your saying that it like sort of opened up a new way of like the possibility of existence. And I just like, I feel like I always say this, but I do feel like I couldn't have done that if it wasn't from the people that I knew, right? From like, we always talk about the strapon.org message board, which was like a post-riot girl thing where everybody was mad at everybody else all the time about like gender and privilege and everything. It was like, you know, this was like 2001 or something.
It's
Like
a very different kind of internet.
yeah, the internet was super different then, right? Nobody ever. So like, yeah, just to acknowledge that like I don't feel like I invented anything, you know what I mean? But like to acknowledge the appreciation that I have for people who came before me, right? Fucking, I won't name names, but the other thing I want to say is I think it's so interesting. You were talking about like being early on hormones, but like kind of thinking about it as like improving your cross-dressing when like, I don't know, I don't want to call you out, but like you frame that as funny when like, I'm so curious about that headspace. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that just sounds like so intense to be like, I'm gonna do this thing, but like how do you convince yourself that? Like, what kind of, I don't want to try to manage your brain, but
I was like, nobody can notice this. Like, I see pictures now and I look like, it's like me and some other guys and we're just holding our beers and there's like one like skinny vampire looking like, and it's like, you know, like I just wandered in and was trying to like, I mean, what direction I was trying to pass in these photos is very unclear, but I think it has to do with that space of like, you know, if you're dissociated, you can't perceive yourself, you can't perceive the ways that these are, and there were role models, but I remember like the role models that I had in that space were like, you know, it was sort of like David Bowie can do it, you know, or like there was a show, Mighty Boosh, and there was a character who was kind of like squiggly with his body, kind of like how to do it. Yeah, Vince Noir, yeah, who's played by the guy on Noel Fielding, thank you, for the Great British Baking Show. And I was like, hormones will help me become like that. I'll get like a shag haircut. And it, you know, it was like this, it would be an electro clash band. That's the headspace.
It's so interesting. Can I, like, I don't want to just keep asking about this, but I think it's so fascinating to be like, yeah, I'm not coming out as anything, I'm not doing any kind of transitioning, but this is what I want to do. Like, how did you get hormones in at that time? Like,
it's actually the exact same as Ames, got them in my book. I went to, like the student health center, and they had an endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist who was like moonlighted as student health, and the endocrinologist was like, I love trans people. They're like the only ones who are grateful. Like basically this is somebody who is prescribing hormones to people who have hormonal disorders that make them very angry a lot of the time. I don't want to speak, you know, not to journalists, but I think most people were like, doctor, why are you helping me at all? You're a terrible doctor. And then trans people came in and were like, oh my God, you saved me. And so he started just like, I mean, he was just like looking for the compliments. So he I had some gender feelings, and he'd be like, here's estrogen, what do you think of me now? He was like, I think he was like 75 years old. Anyway, that's how you get him.
I used in-house pharmacy.com.
Oh, yeah.
That thing still works.
Yeah. I think I ordered some Spiro from them as like a test case before, and then
I just, as a other anecdote, I had an experience where I was on hormones before I was out at work, because I worked at a pizza place, and it would not have gone over well. But I told one of my managers that they were antidepressants, and then he had to call off his marriage, and I went with him to return the diamond ring, and he asked me if he could have some of my antidepressants. That's just my anecdote. What's that? No, I told them they wouldn't work for him. All right, where are we at now? So I guess the next kind of question that I had was, and Imogen, you spoiled it by reading nonfiction.
yeah, fuck you.
Was essentially why fiction, kind of as a like, from the perspective of just as a creative person, but also as a trans person, like, is there a role? I mean, like, because being trans, you're also automatically an activist, and everything that you do is activism. So,
To forward the trans agenda.
yeah, to forward the trans agenda to transgender children.
Right.
How's that working out? But no, I think, like, why choose fiction, or how did you come to choose fiction as a creative outlet?
you want to go first? Do you have
Sure. So I wanted to do nonfiction. That was like what I always wanted to do. I wanted to do like this idea that I think like partially because I was associated, I was like maybe I can become like a nonfiction journalist and like tell other people's stories or something like that. And just like, you know, I was sort of not located in a place and I could just go meet people and tell their stories. And that had always been sort of what I wanted to do. And then well, then I wrote a novel, actually. That's not true. But forget about that. Because I kind of gave up on being a writer after that novel never got published. And what happened is I think I met you all, and the difference between writing and living at that time seemed very, very thin. Like, so this is called Better Off Red, this event, and there were previous Better Off Reds during like the Topside era, like this, in some ways like a legacy event.
That's how I'm protecting myself against copyright infringement, because there's apparently another event called Better Off Red,
Okay.
but I'm like, I've got the emails from like 2013. This was my idea.
And then, I went to those, and I remember like the big moment for me was, I read in Seattle with Casey Platt and Sybil Land, where, seriously, that's just one long one. I've got the pattern now. Okay.
Should I try to talk so they stop?
I'm like, wait, but what is it? What you have to say? Always is. Yeah, anyway, the long story short, I bombed at the reading is basically the point of the story. And it taught me a lot about like, what does it mean to be honest? What does it mean to like, I wrote a thing about how ashamed I was to be trans in front of a room full of trans people. And they did not love it. And like having that feeling of like, oh, here's what it means to read about my own shame in a way that implicates other people in front of a whole room of them was sort of like, actually, what might it actually mean to be honest? What might it mean to actually like live this way to a room full of people who are actually living that way? And because I had no experience living that way, and it was like, let me try it in fiction. Let me see how fiction can be like a test case for how to live. And I still kind of think about fiction as being less about, oh, is this a good story, but like kind of experiments in trying to live and make sense of the world and be honest. And you get to be like a lot realer, I think, sometimes in fiction. Like this story, sorry, I'm answering this a long way, but the story, The Masker, about crossdressers, there's like it's from the perspective of one of the crossdressers, a young crossdresser, and there's a description of another trans woman's surgery that's like so cruel. And that's about it. But people really do talk that way. So it's like, if I'm going to talk this, I can't, it is true that people talk that way. And I want to discuss what that means amongst trans women, to be so cruel in talking about each other's surgeries. And yet, there's no way that I'm going to actually do that about an actual person. And so fiction's a place to actually be like, this is what really happens. How are we going to live with it? And it creates a space to have those kinds of moments that, honestly, I think, I personally, I don't have the stomach to do it in nonfiction. That's my answer.
That's a good answer.
Thanks.
What's your answer?
Yeah, I don't think I really like thought about it super deeply. I read fiction since I was a kid. I discovered Stranger with My Face by Lois Duncan who said that? It's weird now. Yeah, we're best friends now. In like 4th grade, and it was just this like children's horror novel, but I was like, oh, like this is like a teenage girl having these experiences that I can identify with and like probably not get in trouble for identifying with. And that led to horror stuff, and that led to like Dean Koontz and Stephen King, and just like from there on, I just like, I don't know, I wanted to reading a book, not living in a book, although probably there are books that I would have liked to live in. But yeah, so fiction was just kind of always my shit, and I read a lot of it, and I wanted to write it. How did I wind up writing? I mean, I've always written fiction and nonfiction. I wrote zines about my own experiences. This was the first thing I published on a larger scale that was, I think, nonfiction or personal essay stuff. And there was a piece that we talked about a lot during the Topside Press era that was like, for a long time, the memoir that was intended for a cis audience was like the only kind of writing that trans women could publish, right? There were a number of trans women's memoirs in existence, but there was, I always say no trans fiction by trans writers, and that's probably not actually true, but there was so little that it was very difficult to find, and so, I don't know, there is a piece of me that is always going to be a little bit oppositional, defiant, and there was a little bit of like, well, fuck you, no, I can do this, you know what I mean? If I can read Kathy Acker and Dennis Cooper and these people who are writing about their experiences in these really like brutal and blunt and intense ways, like what if I could do that? And so similarly, I feel like there is an honesty that you can do in fiction that comes from a place of like, well, what if I do this thing? Like, what if I put these two things together and like see how they work? That like is really different from telling a story that happened in reality, which is not to say like there are objective tellings of the one truth of anything, just that like, yeah, in fiction you can very much do things that you can't do in nonfiction, and you know, God, y'all haven't seen me talk about this shit in a while, probably haven't heard me talk about this. There's a writer named Samuel Delany, yeah, right? Yeah. He has a book about writing where he put into words something that I hadn't thought about before. He was talking about, so pretentious, bear with me. He was talking about the German Romantic poets, I think, in the 1800s. We were talking about how they were writing, and they had this word that was German that I believe is pronounced Begeisterung, which translates to like be-spiritedness, or like the idea is, this is the idea that animates my will to write something, right? Like, I can have an idea and not write that book, right? But if there's an idea that is compelling enough to me that I'm going to sit down every day and write it out until I've finished it, and then do draft after draft of it, that idea is really interesting, right? And so, for me, that's like where fiction comes from. It's very much like, what if I do this? Like, what if there's a story where this happened, right? What if I took the narrative structure from this book, but applied it to this idea and saw how that shook out? It's just like, again, there's something there that's kind of oppositional. Like, I want to try to make this work, and like, you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I just, again, to be pretentious about it, like, the craft is what's interesting, right? Like, I'm gonna make this thing and make it do what I want it to do, and I'm gonna figure out how to make that work and try to be like, trying things that might not work, you know what I mean? I don't wanna say experimenting, because that's such a thing, but yeah, I don't know, this is kind of just how I think about writing. It's like, yeah, I got this idea, I'd love to see what this looks like in 50,000 words or whatever, and I haven't made it happen that many times, but you know, it's how I approach it. It's just, it is what's compelling to me. There isn't like a meta story as much as I just really like fiction, and like, I've liked a lot of different kinds of fiction, and it's a play-by sandbox that I like to play in.
Well, that's also, you know, we were kind of talking a little bit earlier that it's like, you know, prefer writing fiction, but also, like, I can tell you from a little bit of back-end book sales, like, people prefer reading fiction.
Yeah.
Fiction is by and far, by orders of magnitude, outsells nonfiction in terms of the book world, both at our store and also just across platforms in general. And so there is something about when people sit down to read a book, they overwhelmingly prefer to read fiction. And I'm not sure from the like reader's perspective why that is. I don't know if either of you have like what drives people to want to read fiction, and why is that? You know, you mentioned like the like trans woman transition memoir, which was like, if you were looking for books by trans people at a certain point in our history, that was all you would find, and you wouldn't find that many of them, but that was it. Those were your options. And now, honestly, you'd be hard pressed to find anything a contemporary transition memoir, because that's not what people are wanting to read. And overwhelmingly, there are all these different people that we know who are publishing with major publishers. They're largely publishing fiction. Why do you think that is?
Because nobody wants to fucking try to beat Janet Mock at autobiography.
It's true. She kind of just
won.
stabbed that whole genre in the heart. And,
Yes.
I mean, it's also, it is interesting. Like, I feel like there's a moment in which, like, I mean, partially because of, like, the essays that came out in 2013, which was, like, sort of like, I mean, there was one by Tom Leger, and was it in the collection, or was it maybe it was in the seed? It was basically like, you're a sucker if you write memoir. And, you know, like, you're doing it for cis people, you're doing it for all these different reasons. And I think that was true in 2013, but I think that like, particular idea may have, like you're talking about, what is the era now versus the, you know, past, present, future. I think the era now is that, like, you actually could write a trans memoir for trans people, and I think that, like, Hannah Bear's, like, trans suicide, I was gonna get the name of it. Thank you. Wait, say it one more time, Freddie. Thank you. Trans Girls Suicide Museum is like, you know, it's doing a lot with the way that, like, truth and things work in it. And I think that there's more and more that's a possibility. But also, like, just in terms of this, like, there's so many books that are coming out now by trans people in both small presses and large presses. In this weird moment of backlash, I went on tour for Stag Dance, and I went to, like, 22 cities, which was, like, last spring, which was, like, when it was, like, who knows what Trump is gonna do. Everybody was really scared, and it was, like, it was actually, like, a pretty awful tour, because I would go to, like, different stops, and in each stop, I would just be like, there would be, like, a lot of trans people, and you could just, like, feel palpable fear in the audience, and I had to sort of, like, speak to that fear, and it was, like, it was really exhausting. But at the same time that was happening, like, every single stop, I could, like, be like, and the new books that were released this week are, like, 4 new books by trans people, like, week after week after week. There were, like, 30 books, you know, last spring, at the height of the fear of other people. And so it's this very interesting moment where I think a lot of the sort of prescriptions about what trans literature is or can do that we came up with are breaking down even and because of the weird climate that we have now. Like, there's a strange potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that, like, there's a quality of, like, who becomes your audience, like, who, because there is, like reading rates in general, like, people are reading less, but the people who continue to read a lot and tend to, like, it's become politicized whether or not you read, and, like, where you fall on a certain, like, spectrum of politics. It has, like, genuine predictive capacity to say whether or not you're a person who reads recreationally.
I mean, which is connected to the thing that they were saying a while ago. They do a study that shows that people who read fiction, like, are more empathetic than people who don't. Is that the actual findings? I don't want to talk shit about anybody here who doesn't read fiction.
It sounds like
I think it was like contested. There was, like, this famous thing where, like, they got like, police officers in Mexico City to read Cervantes, and the idea was
So glad that you're here to answer this kind of thing.
Then the police officers would be more kind to the people that they're stopping, and, like, that's a great kind of like humanities story where we're all reading Don Quixote now to be better cops. And, you know, well, one need not say too much more. The methodologies that was extrapolated in all sorts of different ways. But I'll say, because I write fiction and I'd like to sell books, yeah, sure, makes me want
just as my favorite anecdote about Don Quixote is that it's written in 2 parts. The first part was published first. It inspired a bunch of knockoff people writing Don Quixote stories, and the second part is essentially Cervantes being like, oh, you're going to use my character? Well, now here he is, and he's going on this stupid adventure, and he gets beat up, and he denies everything that he ever believed in, and he's dead. That's the second part of Don Quixote. So we're getting towards the end of the shouldn't take long. What's next? Where are we going?
Has anybody ever read the culture novels by Ian M. Banks? Yes, that's where we're going.
Well, obviously you're going to have to explain that.
I will not.
Okay.
No, it's utopian post-scarcity science fiction, sort of anarchist, but not flashy about it. It's a little bit of a sarcastic thing. I don't know where the fuck we're going. I don't know. I mean, a lot of translit is happening, and it keeps happening, and it's more is in response to more. It continues to flourish. Like, that much is clear.
It's true, yeah. I mean, looking at the, I never realized how many books you have to look at when you, order books for a bookstore. That was never, what I did as a bookseller before I bought a bookstore, and then I bought a bookstore, and now all I do all my life is look at all the catalogs of books. And there's so many trans people being published. But, I don't know, the future is full of promise, but also seems a little bit scary, and I guess that's always been true about the future, and that's kind of the problem with it.
Well, I'm curious what you think of this, because, so you used to say this thing, and I stole it from you, and I know you got it from I forgot which author was it, but it was about the stages of minority literature.
Yeah.
And this is from someone help me out here if they remember, the 70s feminist writer. But the first stage of minority literature is we're just like you. And the second stage of minority literature is actually we reject you, we hate you, we push you away. And the third stage of minority literature is actually we don't define ourselves in relation to you. We're not here nor there. And that's the schema of this. But I've always thought that and this is not in the literature, it's just my thought, that there's a fourth level, which would be the moment in which the dominant culture takes up the point of view of the minority. So you have, for instance, white writers, if they're going to talk about their race, they have to talk about their race through terms that were defined by black scholars. We have this straight people totally understand themselves through ideas of sexuality that were about and created by gay people. And then we're in this weird moment now where cis people who don't even know that they're cis they don't just don't know what to call it that. They do know usually they're cis. But maybe not. And because this thing is happening where suddenly cis people are using the lenses that were created by trans people, including even by those of us up here. After that, there was an episode of White Lotus where they talked about autogynephilia last season, and there was this whole thing, and I cannot tell you the number of people who and it was kind of a transphobic take on it, but the terms were entirely trans terms, and by what's his name, White? Yeah. Everybody forwarded me this, there was the big monologue of the season was basically an autogynephilia monologue that everybody in America, most popular show, are wow, that's for me. and I was oh, this is it. The trans terms are actually now taken up by the mainstream of culture, and you see that the question of the performance of gender is all over in a way that is in the terms that are defined by trans people. Texas Senate race, Elon Musk with his chainsaw, all these things. We're all performing gender in a Butlerian, is that a word?
Sounds correct.
Manner. And so then I'm number one, are you scooping me? and two, actually what is everyone's on testosterone these days, And I want to write about hormones, and I'm there's a special trans thing. You take a hormone, and everyone's oh yeah, I got that. I do my injections on my peptides twice a week. I take my testosterone cream, and I'm you do it better than me. And so, how do I write about that? Other than suddenly I'm not this idea of audience that I came up with, which was you're trans, you're writing for trans people. idea of like the direct audience is diffusing into a larger culture. And I think that one of the challenges is like, on one hand, nobody will admit that that's happening because there's so much transphobia, but on the other hand, that's the context in which we'll have to write. And I wonder what you think of that.
I think that was smarter than anything I was going to say.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I can do a trained censorship
Yeah, I think the only thing I have to add is I think that idea of the 3 stages of minority writing came from Joanna Russ.
Oh, thank you, that's your best, yeah.
But no, that's really smart. Yeah, I got nothing. I want to think about that a lot.
But I mean, yeah, I do, like that has been for me, like, and I think that it's also where the stage I'm at in my kind of, in my career where I'm wondering who am I talking to, who's showing up, what kind of affinity do I have with an audience, and those questions that were like, really, you could make hard lines around identity because there was just, everything was so shunned and the ideas just wouldn't translate. It's harder to say, to like make like, this is the identity that's going to create a firm border. The borders are porous. Yeah, that's what I think about for the future.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have thought about it.
Yeah. That's the plan here. Yeah. We can now open it up to kind of more general Q&A. We, depending on how many people have questions, we may not get to everybody, but we can go from there. Ideally, I don't know. I guess is there another microphone that could go around? Oh, would you like to carry it around? Okay, lovely. So we'll have...
Have we introduced Diana?
Yeah, we have Diana Whitney. The overwhelming majority of the work to make this event happen, so very much appreciate that. And that's you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Good. I like to be loud, so. Show of hands, who's got questions for our authors?
1.5 questions. I'm just interested if either of you have read Ranked Competitive Breast Growth and if you have thoughts about it. And if not, I have a different question.
I have not.
I've not read it.
Cool.
I have questions for you about it.
Big fan, highly recommend. Cool. In that case, I would like to ask, so Ames is like a very unique character in fiction as someone who detransitioned, and this would be open to anyone who wanted to answer it. But I'm interested in how y'all think about Ames as a character.
Well, I will say, like, some deep, like, what is the word, headcanon for me, is that the deal with Ames's name is that he used to be James, and then he became Amy, and then he detransitioned, and he became Ames, and he, like, couldn't quite get that J back a little, but that J for James was, like, in my head, a reference to James H., you know, in like, that's, like, I was signaling my sort of literary ancestry, I guess. You know, I think that I think that a lot of times you write a character and they're like a snapshot in time, right? I might not have written Ames the same way now, but at the time I felt very entitled to talk about detransition. I felt very much like, as a trans person, because it loomed for me, detransition was something that I got to write about, and I wanted to write about, and I still largely feel that way. But I think that now the conversation about detransition is so much about regret that I would have said many different things about Ames than I would say now. I would basically say, like, I wasn't worried about it, so I didn't like launch a defense of like why I'm entitled to write about detransition, and I just kind of let Ames be. But I would say now that you know, that so much of what happens around detransition is a weaponization of the idea of regret. And then actually, what I think AIMS shows is that like it's actually okay to regret things. That, like that's an adult way of living, is you make a choice, it doesn't work out, and you're allowed to regret it. That you don't live your life not making choices so that you can avoid ever having to experience regret. Like people, I ride motorcycles, it can go wrong, I would regret it. People join the army, they move across the country for jobs that don't work out, they marry people that don't work out. And nobody says, don't do any of those things because you might regret it. And yet, transition is a special case where it's like, you might regret this, so don't do it. That has become the conversation for me about AIMS because I've had to go around defending AIMS in some ways for 5 or 6 years now. That it's very hard for me to be in the mindset of the person who wrote AIMS in a very much like, I wrote AIMS without feeling very defensive of AIMS. Like, there's an irony about the fact that I named the book Detransition Baby. You know, like it was like, that was funny to me in 2018.
Me too. Still
Yeah,
is.
so, you know, and the degree to which like people are like scared of that book title is different now. And I might not have had people go around holding the word detransition these days the way that I was very, I mean, I'd like to think that I would, but I have run into people who are upset by it so much that it's like, I can't, it's like I've touched that hot stove too many times, that it would be hard for me to not pull that punch. So basically I would say like the answer to AIMS in the true sense, and the author who wrote it, is what exists in the book. And what I can say now is like this person who's touched the stove too much, their take on the AIMS character. But I mean, I think AIMS is for me, like really related to James H. I don't know if you have things to say about James H.
I don't know that I have anything intelligent to say
Yeah.
about James H. in this context, but I am curious, what are people upset about? Like, I know it's kind of a live wire topic, but the idea that people would be mad at you about that, I'm just curious.
There's a certain irony. Like in the book, I gave Laura Jane Grace shit for titling her book Tranny, right?
Red has also been mad about that
Yeah. So what happened
stuff.
for me is that she was like promoting it in Brooklyn, and she put up a bunch of posters in my neighborhood that just said tranny. Like read paper posters, and I was walking home from the train. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" You know? And then like a couple days later, I was like, "Oh, it's Laura Jane Grace," you know, like. But I think about myself like being like walking home from the train, just you know, trans woman, transing along is a verb, trying to live my life. It was like training. And I think about now, every time like somebody who's questioning their gender is just trying to walk past a bookstore, it's like, detransition, baby. And they're like, what the fuck? You know, like, and so there's like a thing where, in some ways, you know, my book did what Reese, like my book contains an accidental critique of itself, I think, in that section. I'm glad this is recorded, so if Laura Jane Grace is out there, I'm really sorry.
I'm sure she's watching.
Yeah. Writing songs about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Looks like right here, maybe.
Yeah. Hi. I'm just wondering if you two have anything to talk about. Like, I write sometimes. I write trans fiction sometimes. And I write fiction sometimes, and I try not to be like I write trans fiction. And I wonder if you guys, if either of you would have something to say about like if you would experience the feeling of like not just wanting to like limit yourself to that lane versus if you feel like that, or like is this important to write about, or versus like am I just limiting myself to one thing or one, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Do you have thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I can talk about how I approach that. The first thing I'll say is that, yeah, whenever I go to a bookstore, I mean, I don't look for my book all the time at a fucking bookstore, but like, when I am at a bookstore and I'm like, I wonder if this is in like literature or LGBT, right? And if it's in LGBT, I'm fucking judging you. You know what I mean? This is a novel, right? If you have a like LGBT fiction section, then okay, sure. But often it's shelved outside of fiction because it's a book about a trans woman or and a maybe trans, I don't know how to describe James H. The point is, yes, I think of it as literature. As for whether it's important to write about trans stuff, I can't think that way. If I sat down and I was like, I'm going to write an important book, I would not be able to write that book. You know what I mean? Instead it comes from a place of like, what is an idea that is compelling enough to me to put in all the work to finish a book? And in my experience, that's the book about trans women. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really interested in writing about other stuff. And like, I've done it when I've written for TV shows, you know, I've written about people who are trans. It's not like I'm opposed to that. But when I'm sitting down to write something for myself, to write fiction, like, I'm just interested in writing about trans people. Like, there's plenty to say about trans people that has not been said, right? There is plenty of like interesting fiction to be written about trans people, and so it's sort of a question of like people like Red who are deciding where the books go. That's not my problem. That's Red's problem.
So that actually kind of sparked a thing with me. We had an LGBT section in fiction when I took over the bookstore, and one of the first things that we kind of like did talk about it a bit was I eliminated that section. I put all the books into general fiction, and it is a mixed thing. So I actually have specifically had somebody come up and say, like, you used to have an LGBT fiction section, now I can't find it. I said, well, that section is no longer there. I can only find things, but they had wanted to browse things. But I often find that like identity fiction section is a section that gives everyone else permission to not look at those books, and not put those books into the selection process of
That's
what
really
they
good.
may or may not read, and sections them to be different and somehow unworthy, and that like fiction, that the idea that even like trans fiction is distinctly different than fiction, that there's a different category, I think gets into troublesome waters. There's not a perfect solution, because then you have that person who's looking for that thing and you can't help them find it as well as if it were there. But I think the value of saying this is part of a broader culture and this is part of literature, and we put literature in literature, at least from a bookstore perspective, but you know, I can go real blind with it, pretend
Yeah.
that that's more important than it sounds. I think that's kind of the line for me is that when you let it be set aside, then it can be ignored. When you say that this just is fiction, and you have to decide whether or not you care about it to the broader audience, I think you're giving more power.
I want to add to that because I think your bookstore ends up becoming a metonym for society at large.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But no, but it is that, I mean, the thing is, that other people have faced this before, trans people, right? Like, Toni Morrison in her Nobel speech said she claimed a space at the margins and moved the center to her, right? She was like, I'm writing about black women, and that's at the margins, and by the time I'm done, it's gonna be at the center. And you say, I'm writing books that are so good that people are gonna come to me, and they're gonna be at the center. And you have like American post-war literature is like a litany of this happening. When Philip Roth started writing in like after the war, this was Jewish literature. And by the time Philip Roth died, it was American literature, you know. And part of it is that Philip Roth had and Toni Morrison was exceptional, but Philip in most of the commissions, but Philip Roth had the luxury of longevity, right? So because Philip Roth was writing for 40 years and could write like 25 books, he could influence things and move the culture to him. And the question that I think about for trans writers is whether or not we are going to have the luxury, whether or not someone like me is going to have the luxury to write for 40 years. In the past, trans people have not had the luxury to write books for 40 years, and so they've not been able to move the culture to them. It is possible that we are entering a stage in which someone like me can write 25 books, someone like Imogen can write 25 books, and we can move the culture towards us in the ways that I just mentioned in the last question. But it's also possible that we simply won't have that luxury, and that these books will be an anomaly, and we won't have the time in a material way to move the culture to us. That is kind of the moment, the question that I think, if you're being a trans writer right now, and you're asking that kind of questions, should I write trans literature? You're also asking yourself, do I have the luxury to not care about this? Because I think I also have the luxury to live a long life with a lot of time. And if you do, the question doesn't matter. If you don't, it matters tremendously.
We want to leave space for a little bit of meet and greet, a little bit of book signing time. There are lovely desserts and refreshments in the next room. We've got time for one more question from the audience. This was the first hand I see here. I apologize to anyone in the back, because everyone who's right in front of me got saw first. That's how my eyes work.
I kind of have 1.5 questions. You mentioned a book, Somebody Banks.
Will you put the microphone closer to your mouth?
You mentioned a book or a book series by Somebody Banks.
Ian F. Banks.
Ian Banks. What's the book called?
It's a series of novels called the Culture Novels. There are 10 of them. I had a custom water bottle made on Etsy because I like them so much. I just kind of am constantly rereading them. It's post-scarcity, sci-fi, anarchist, space, brilliance.
Okay, so my actual question is kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, Tori. But like for somebody who is sort of a new author, say like if you were holding your first manuscript completed and looking for a home for it, or a publisher for it, or an audience for it, in this moment, politically, socially, etc., this kind of enters into like writer advice, but it's not entirely, my question is not entirely writer advice, but like, what's your take on that in this moment? Like you were saying, the fear that you saw on your book tour last year, the chance of this moment to move culture going forward, like, where would you go? What would you do if you were holding that book right now?
I mean, I just gave a speech, so.
That's a really good speech, though. I mean, for me, I think the thing is about, holy shit, there's like that door is like a mirror, and now I have to fucking look at myself. You have to get off the internet. Is kind of what I take. Like, I feel like everybody is living online. I mean, I don't mean that in like a shit-talking way or anything, but like so many of us are like, I look at music stuff a lot online, and people are like, fuck, man, I'm doing all the algorithm shit, and I'm like paying to get on playlists, and I'm doing all this stuff, and yet I'm getting no tracks, and it's like, have you played a show? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we've gotten so conditioned to staring at our little glowing misery rectangles that it's hard to remember that, like, and I'm not saying it's easy, right? I live one town over, like, it is hard to find a community of people to connect with, and to be sharing that stuff, and to be making people listen to it, and I don't mean to imply that you're doing it all on the internet or anything like that, just like, yeah, there comes a point where it's like, how are we actually connecting with communities? You know what I mean? Like, how are we connecting with the people who are going to give a shit about this stuff? Because often we find ourselves firing off stuff online and getting nothing back. And it's like, yeah, because there's so much online that there's no way for anybody to stand out. So again, I'm really focusing on the internet shit. But I just mean like, yeah, you gotta find a way to meet people who are looking to fuck shit up too. You know what I mean? And so much of it is luck too, unless you're doing it yourself. Like, I'm old, but I like fully still believe in, I've got chapbooks that I printed up over there, you know what I mean? Like, make shit up, find a place to read it where people are gonna hear it. You start small, it doesn't matter, like, it's better to start small, I think you just kind of have to do it. I don't know, that feels...
Yeah, no, but I think that's actually like you doing that changed my life, like both of you. Like, we're doing this event tonight, Red used to just throw like readings in anarchist spaces and bars. Like it was just you used to do zines. I lived with one of my roommates for a while was like a band member of yours, where it's just like
Wait, who was it?
Chrissy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, our band was
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Tallgirl.bandcamp.com, y'all.
yeah, so like people you figure out like what is missing in your moment, and then you make something. Like I started out where I thought, oh, I have to publish a bunch of stuff, and then I met people like these are my books were self-published, and I mean not to like brag, but like the self-published books about sissies and cross-dressers were nominated for a Pulitzer this year. And that's not like, I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm just saying like, you can do it.
Yes.
You know, if you're like, well, the way to get published is to get an agent and I don't know, start a Substack, maybe it's like this, I don't know, then everybody else is doing it too, right? And you don't know who you're saying it for, but like, I read Imogen's book. They had good parties. They had good tours. I wanted to be a part of it, and not only did I want to be a part of it, so many other people wanted to be a part of it, and it was just like an organic, like you just want to do things, and like the ability to just do things is something I learned from both Imogen and Red, and it's like literally why I'm here tonight, like in a 10-year time frame and in a 3-week time frame. So thanks, guys.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I just was going to ask if I could say one more thing.
No.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you. I was invited to do a reading. There's some people in Boston who are doing a reading series called Tea for Tea Readings. Did I hear a tiny whoop? Because they're fucking doing it. I got invited to read there, and I read a story that's the one that's the chapters over there, not to keep dropping plugs, but it was fucking rad. Like, it's a bunch of people who know each other, who are consistently coming in. There was one who was reading a new chapter of an ongoing thing that I guess they're reading every month there, but like, they have created this literary community that does these amazing readings, I think at the same bar once a month. It's like, you can just do that.
Yeah, in Alston, that bar. It was the best stop of my tour. It was so much fun. And it was Calvin Kapelovich started it. People just came, they did stand up randomly. Like, it just was a good time. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, we're in agreement. Just like, yeah, you can do that shit. You just have to figure out how to do it when you have no resources or whatever. But
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of my long-standing advice for doing anything of any kind of publishing a book or having events or anything like that is that just do it. Like I accept that I've got cool friends who are cool authors, and when I'm like I want to put an author event together, I have from a lifetime of just doing things, have the privilege of having actual big name cool people in a Rolodex. But really if you want things, the things that you want to happen will likely not be made for you.
Right.
And the easiest, though it's not easy, the easiest way to make the things that you want happen exist is to make them.
Can I know we're holding everybody hostage and we're
Yeah,
trying to
it's an absolute hostage situation.
Can everybody here who's writing trans stuff just put your hands up so you can find each other after and just start a thing, please? Because there's a bunch of us.
Good.
This is the uncontested center of transliteration.
Exactly.
The reigning transliterary capital of North America, at the very least. But there's room to grow from there. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Museum. Thank you so much for having us. HB took care of most of the things, so I don't have to remember everybody to thank. which is not to say that I'm ungrateful for everyone who did the thing, because the other real secret is you don't actually have to do anything. You just have to have ideas and tell people, and then they'll do most of the work for you. And then you get to sit on stage with the microphone. Seem like you're real cool and everything. Anyway, there are books for sale in the next room over, and there's also desserts, and you'll have a chance to chat with each other and start your literary networks, and also have a little bit of chat time with our authors. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.